US President Donald Trump has indicated that he may extend the deadline. Well, he outright said that he will extend the deadline for negotiations with Iran, expressing confidence that Tehran could still come to the table despite signals from Iranian officials suggesting reluctance to engage under current conditions. Joining me now to discuss the latest developments, I'm joined by Bassel Doueik, Middle East researcher at Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, joining us live from Lisbon. Bassel, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, some information has changed even since my preparation for this broadcast and for our interview with you. President Trump, well, let's start with a question that hasn't changed. President Trump has said the deadline for Iran to engage in negotiations could be extended. What does this signal about Washington's assessment of diplomatic progress so far?
So I think what Trump is trying to do here is to force the Iranian into a deal with pre-war conditions. And this is a no-brainer for the Iranians. Trump wants Iran to have no nuclear weapons, no ballistic missiles, no control of the strait, and just cave in to America's demands, especially the pre-war demands. However, we've seen that Pakistan's information minister yesterday said that the Iranians will not send a delegation and they will only come to the table if the US lifts the blockade. We've seen an urge from the White House to send people to Pakistan in order to negotiate with the Iranians. However, we've not seen the reciprocal from the Iranians. So it seems we are at a deadlock. Trump has caved in, actually, and extended the ceasefire. And what's important here is that he extended the ceasefire indefinitely. He didn't say that it's 24 hours. He didn't say it's 48 hours. He just said that the ceasefire is extended. And I think that's highly significant.
Okay, so as you said, it appears that the United States, well, Trump has caved. We were expecting a second round of talks in Pakistan. Clearly, Iran refuses to come forward. And so therefore, Vice President J.D. Vance, Washington has said, has also decided against going. So has the United States decided against sending the delegation because of the Iranian stance? How do you evaluate that change? And if or when will a second round of talks take place, do you think? And what is Pakistan's view now that this delegation from both sides is no longer willing to go there?
Well, we can start this analysis with Pakistan's position here. Pakistan is trying to bring two entities that are deeply unaligned onto one table in order to ink a deal that could actually save the region, save the Strait of Hormuz, which is the center of gravity of energy resources, and save the world from global repercussions. However, I believe that Washington's decision not sending the delegation into Pakistan is directly related to Iran's decision not to send its delegation. So that's why we said Trump caved into the Iranians' demands, and now we're standing at no deal. There's no nuclear compromise. There's no caving in for the demands, and now Iran still controls the strait, which is not beneficial for anyone, to say the least. But I would say that this move is significant because it's a preemptive move by the Trump administration to actually exit the war and let the region resolve the issue by itself, which may have major repercussions on the U.S. standing in the Middle East, especially for Gulf states in the region.
Okay, and now some reports indicate Tehran's unwilling to negotiate while under threat of military escalation. And another development there was a top Iranian official, Mahdi Mohammadi, an advisor to Iran's parliament speaker. He said he dismissed the move by Washington as a ploy to buy time for a surprise attack and called for a military response to the US blockade. Now, is this a broader strategy to improve bargaining leverage? What do you think?
Definitely, that is a strategy to improve bargaining leverage, but also let's dissect this into two positions. The first position is that the Iranians do not trust the Americans anymore, and that's obvious. In June 2025, mid-negotiations, Israel carried out a preemptive attack against Iran, which led the U.S. to strike the nuclear facilities later on in the war. Again, since the start of this war, we've seen that there was negotiations between the Iranians and the Americans with the Israelis attacked Iran mid-negotiations. So the Iranians do not really believe what the Trump administration says. On the other hand, I believe there are two positions within Iran. There are people that actually are against the ceasefire. They want to continue the fighting. They believe they have the leverage. They believe they can control the strait indefinitely. They believe that the U.S. is running out of interceptors, that the Gulf states will come to a compromise with Iran under threat, and that's why the ceasefire was a big mistake. Let's not forget, Iran has the leverage here, not the U.S., and that's unfortunate, but that's the fact. Iran has the leverage. The U.S. does not have the leverage in this conflict, and we've seen that Iran has the strategic depth to actually withstand all the attacks by Israel and the U.S., and that's the current situation right now.
Okay, let's stay on Gulf states for a moment, Bassel. Early in the piece, it appeared that the Gulf states were leaning more towards the goals of Washington, but now they seem to be leaning more towards Iran. Firstly, would you agree with that? And how do you think they're evaluating these latest developments? What are we going to be hearing from the Gulf states?
Well, the Gulf states' position is highly precarious, and let's not forget that the Gulf states in general are the most are the countries that actually are losing the most from this war. Qatar has, there are projections, I think by Bloomberg, that its GDP will shrink by 16%. The UAE is under constant attack by Iran. 2,819 missiles and drones were launched by Iran against the UAE. Also, we've seen damage against U.S. bases in Saudi Arabia, which led it to shift its energy production and export to the Red Sea rather than from the Strait of Hormuz. So they are in a highly precarious situation. However, I wouldn't say that they are leaning more towards the Iranian position. I believe actually they are more hostile towards Iran. Saudi Arabia is hostile towards Iran. The UAE especially is the most hostile country against Iran. We've seen that with official statements actually from the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Interior and Information, etc. So in this case, what the Gulf states see is that the U.S. bases on their land is actually a burden than an actual benefit from them. They would like to still acquire the most advanced U.S. weaponry, but they would feel that it's better for the U.S. to leave their countries alone.
Okay, Bassel, that's all we have time for today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you for having me.